Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Yeah, I was an original co-author of the Superfund law in 1980 on the committee. And one of the issues that, of course, came right to me was when Ann Anderson, a mother with a young son, Jimmy Anderson, visited me in her office, in my office, and told me that the boy had leukemia. And that she had organized other mothers in Woburn, Massachusetts, to go door to door to find other children who had leukemia in this part of Woburn. And along with Love Canal and a couple of other sites, that became the motivating force for the creation of Superfund. In fact, it became the movie A Civil Action, the book A Civil Action. And the mothers were the ones who identified this problem, not the experts. You know, not the city officials. It was the mothers. In the movie, they make the lawyer the hero. It was the mothers. Now, Jimmy died from leukemia, and on that site now is a huge development, industrial development, and the Jimmy Anderson Transportation Center as well. So we've actually converted it. But the first and most important goal we had was just to make sure that kids didn't die, that they weren't drinking the water, that they weren't put in situations that could lead to these human tragedies. So as I look at what we're talking about right now, I see the EPA making a decision that they have to choose between the sites that have an impact just on the health of families and those that actually could be redeveloped. And then this limited budget would kind of prioritize those that could also be redeveloped for commercial purposes. And that's the kind of triaging that is absolutely unacceptable. I mean, this program is there in order to make sure that you don't have to make that kind of a choice, that families that have kids who are exposed to these toxins are not ever exposed, regardless of whether or not the property can be redeveloped. So as you, Ms. Props, look at this kind of dramatic downsizing of the Superfund program, what are the implications for those families that have kids in areas that will never be redeveloped?
Well, I'm not a scientist or a health professional, so I'm not sure I can totally answer your question, but I think you raise a really good point. I mean, the thing that I think concerned me most about the task force report is that over a third of the 42 recommendations are about redevelopment and reuse. And last time I read the statute, there's nothing in the statute about redevelopment and reuse. And while it may be a good thing, I'm not a local government official, I did spend time with Mayor Rabbit, who was at the Industrialplex site near Woburn, and what he was very happy about were the tax revenues to his city. And I think that the idea that redevelopment and reuse is more important than cleaning up sites or reducing human exposure is wrong and not consistent with the statute. So it's fine to be happy about redevelopment and reuse, but to place that first seems to me really bad public policy. So
exactly. And so, yeah, there was a wonderful side benefit to Woburn that they got to redevelop the site. But the first and foremost goal that we had to have was just to make sure that all these children didn't have other equivalents around the United States, and we used it as the example. And what we're seeing here is, once again, kind of a denial of what this program means to families. In fact, in 1984, when Ann Gorsuch was the head of the EPA, Rita Lavelle, who was in charge of the Superfund program, actually went to prison for lying to our committee over on the House side about that program. She actually had to do time. So this has been very controversial right from the beginning. It was slow-rolled by the Reagan administration. It's never been a program, obviously, now that the Trump administration is in, that they really embrace, that they will give the hug to and say, I understand why this funding has to be there in order to help children, in order to help families avoid the kinds of catastrophes which we've seen in the past. In Massachusetts, if you could if you're an expert, if you know Mayor Rabbit in Woburn, that is great, and he was a big ally of mine at that time, and it took a lot of courage for him to stand up. How could this impact the remaining Superfund sites in Massachusetts? We have a lot of them. What's the consequence in Massachusetts if this kind of funding cut occurs?
I think there is no way to know exactly what the consequence is right now because we haven't seen how the cuts would be taken at EPA, but obviously it could slow down cleanups, it could cut staff, it could affect the enforcement program. I mean, again, a 30% cut is just a huge cut in one fiscal year to a federal program. So, I mean, I think that it would cause just a lot of disarray and having to figure out how to deal with the cut, just like when there's a threatened furlough and everything shuts down. But I must admit, I can't tell you exactly to Massachusetts, but it's fair to say that a 30% cut is.
Right. Is it fair to say that even if the EPA task force comes back with constructive recommendations, that if there's a 30% cut in the funding for the remediation of these sites, that there's going to be great harm because the triaging will have to, in fact, occur, and that a vision without funding is an hallucination? You know, saying that you care, here's the vision, but then cutting the funding by 30% only results in more kids being exposed around the country.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, nobody has said this to me, and I'm not. The concern is that you end up with a program where all you have is the removals program. That when you have a huge cut and you can't really fully fund remedial actions under the law, that what you end up with, and the removals program is considered very successful, it's just a different program, but that the concern of somebody like me or various people is that you basically move away from the NPL cleanup remedial action program and you end up with removals only, which are not really short-term, but in theory less money and less time, and addressing immediate risk, but not addressing long-term hazard. And that's the thing to watch out for is if you took a huge cut, that if I were the AA or the office director, that's what I'd do. I mean, again, you only have certain choices. So that's the thing to sort of watch out for is, are you really choking off the long-term cleanup program or not? There's nothing in their report that says that. I could be completely wrong, but that, over the past 25 years, that's what one has concerns about is are you gutting the long-term cleanup program or not? Again, there's nothing that says they are, but that's kind of what you want to watch.
I got it. Yeah, that's a 30% cut is like moving kryptonite over towards Superfund, and it will really significantly harm its strength and its ability to be able to help.
But I want to be Wonder Woman instead.
I thank you so much for all your work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.